What does it actually feel like in the room when there's a major cyber attack unfolding?
Time is the most critical component to any kind of a cyber attack. Like, that's your primary focus is, how do I stop the bleeding? How do I stop the spread? And how do I actually eradicate the threat actor as quickly as possible? If we're talking about hospitals or critical organizations where legitimately people's lives are on the line, then you got to think about the damage that could cause. If there are people reliant on really, really significant technology that needs to be on, what if a threat actor actually just strips you of that access and you have no idea when you can get that back?
We acknowledge the Gayamagal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we record this podcast. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. The best career advice won't come from an AI prompt. It comes from the people who've lived it. Welcome to Tech Careers Hotline, brought to you by the Tech Council of Australia. I'm your host, Adair Robbins, and this is a podcast for anybody who's curious about a career in tech. We put real questions from real people to the leaders and builders of tomorrow. Let's begin. If cybersecurity feels like a world that wasn't built for you, this is the episode that's going to change that. Shameela Gonzalez is Executive Director at CyberCX, and she's one of the most trusted names in Australian cyber. She's a board advisor, a crisis responder, and a proud 4-unit English student who never looked back. Today we talk about what a cyber attack actually looks like and feels like from the inside, how she turned a return from maternity leave into a career leap, and the one piece of advice she was given that she will never, ever follow. This is Tech Careers Hotline. Welcome, Shameela. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Adair. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a chat.
So let's go back to the beginning. So you've said in the past you weren't a maths or engineering person at school. How did you end up building a career in tech?
I think it's probably first important to acknowledge that it took me a long time to build the courage to even say I'm not a maths or an engineer person inside a technology role. Yeah, it's true. I did terribly at maths in school. In fact, I am very proudly of the generation where I didn't have to do it for my HSC. And as soon as I was given the option, I opted not to.
I did the same.
I am a proudly 4-unit English gal. I write an essay or a strategy and I'm there. Mathematics and my brain just don't gel. So I did a double bachelor's when I left high school. So I did science and information technology. It's InfoSec. And then there's Bachelor of Business. And I hit my wall of maths immediately. So I had to do my foundational accounting, economics, and then I had to do programming fundamentals on the tech side. So I feel like I scapegoated enough to be able to get through a lot of those foundational subjects, but like it just was apparent to me even more that is just ultimately never going to be a strength. One of the things that I'm really, really proud of is that it didn't preclude me from being able to still confidently say even today that I have a career in technology and that there are lots of vibrant careers in technology. That doesn't mean you need to have that kind of a mind. And I'd probably even go further to say actually creative minds are well loved and there is a space for them. And that sort of cutting edge or innovative and creative thinking mind is actually as equally as attributable and valuable in tech. So funny story, when I went to university, I kind of had an idea that technology was still my ongoing passion. I was so passionate about tech in high school that I actually did my HSC for tech a year before my HSC, which is a pretty cool accelerated course to be able to do. So I kind of knew it was going to be my thing. And then obviously then pursued it in university. Then on my Bachelor of Business side, I kind of sat with that conundrum of like, well, if maths isn't my strength, what do you major in? And I remember doing my foundational subject of organisational psychology. And I had a lecturer that stood up and started like using Gothic literature and vampire analogies to talk about different personas and personalities in like old organisational psychology sort of theories. I fell in love. I was like, this is me. This is my domain. So I majored in HR because I simply loved the study of people and how they behave.
Wow.
So I guess jumping ahead, you can see how innately valuable that is because everything we do in tech has always been about people. As it's just become an embedded part of our lives and it bleeds into absolutely everything we do, the people sitting behind the scenes who are developing all sorts of tech solutions have to innately understand humans and how humans interact and want to engage and then have like a digital sort of, I guess, playground for us to create. So I actually think the accidental marriage of the two ended up being the best thing for my career. So yeah, I haven't let the maths or the engineering, let's say lack of capability stop me because I think you can actually find different pathways and different creative ways in. And that's what I saw actually throughout my career is meeting people from all different walks of life, actually find really, really interesting ways into any kind of a STEM pathway, really.
Amazing. Yeah, and those human skills are more important than ever in the age of AI.
Yeah,
So
100%.
great to hear. So let's stay in your early career. So you were one of the first women in your grad cohorts. Take us back to that time. What was your first day like?
Yeah, so I wasn't the only woman, but it's important to note that at the time, which I think we're talking around 2014, and you're starting out in one of the biggest technology grad programs in the country. So I started
Mm,
at Combank. Um, and actually, I think I was on a really interesting time where we actually started to just see the cusp of more female entrants enough that the numbers were actually sort of balancing a little bit. And I think what we saw was that openness, that sort of desire to go, actually, tech is changing. Actually, we need to bring in and invite a broader skill set. And all of those things that those mandatory checklists maybe are not so mandatory, and we can find different people from different
mm,
pathways in. So I actually think I was really fortunate that I had more women in my cohort. But certainly, you're still entering a large technology division that has historically been male
mm,
dominated.
mhm,
I was really fortunate to be a part of a university that preaches heavily about industry partnerships. So it
mm.
encouraged a lot of tech students in particular to get internships. So I'd already done 12 weeks in a summer intern program at Combank the year prior. So coming back to day one, there's a pretty robust sort of onboarding process. And I think this has been a really, really valuable lesson for me in actually any industry that I've worked in or any new role is they didn't start with, hey, welcome to being a tech grad, let's talk tech. They started with, welcome to a bank. Welcome to the things that we do that are like critically important for millions of Australians every day. Here is how we meet people on a daily basis, whether it is physically in a branch, in a call center, or whether it is when they log into an app and they interact with us. This is where we are vitally important to people's livelihoods, and this is where we take that
Mm.
service incredibly seriously. You need that level setting. There's no world where you just sort of go straight into the, okay, what application are we developing and how do we modify it? Actually, it's who do we serve ultimately? What are their needs?
Mm.
And then working backwards from there. So I think that was like a really, really valuable start and a great formation for such an early part of your career where you start to realize, where does my purpose come from? And then everything else is sort of secondary and builds from there.
Yeah, great. The bigger picture. And that kind of leads to the next question. So you spent 3 years as an advisor to the most senior security leaders at Combank. What did that job actually involve, and what did you learn about advising somebody that senior?
Yeah. So interesting pathway in. So
Mm.
picture just before I stepped my first day into cybersecurity, which um, caveat, I didn't know a thing about cybersecurity before I actually joined it as a chief of staff. Um, which sounds wild, but there is a logic to the madness. I had just come off one of the bank's biggest regulatory remediation programs at the time. So if you cast your mind back, there was a huge era of the Royal Commission. There were quite a bit of like scrutiny into, let's say, risk remediation that was
Hmm.
required at the bank at the time. And I had just been doing tech transformation. I was the sort of translator between the business and tech, developing cool stuff. And then my career got thrusted into risk and actually the world of like regulatory pressure. After about a year and a half of that, it was actually my mentor who became the Chief Information Security Officer, or
Ah.
CISO as we call it. And
Hmm.
I remember sort of just sitting with him, and he had also never worked in cybersecurity, but he was trusted as a leader to be able to come in and pick up the capability and then take it to where the bank needed it to be. And I remember the sort of like mentoring conversation where he'd said, "I'm just about to take on this role. Would you like to come in and help me?" And it was sort of like two people that are going to be grouping up a subject matter that is quite intense,
Mm. Yeah.
but thinking, how do we use our innate skill sets to go and help a function and then grow it? And so very, very, very quickly, you have to be really humble and aware of where your drawbacks are. I very quickly need to learn about the world of cybersecurity
Mm.
because there are hundreds of people that are going to be depending on you to actually strategically lead it. But then remembering, hey, what am I good at? What am I actually really innately good at that is going to be really valuable into where I'm going? So I'd say my first foray into cyber, I probably had the luckiest pathway in because I had a mentor that became my boss, which I think is
Mm.
is arguably a really cool way to change that relationship. I lost a mentor, but I had a great pathway in.
Mhm.
Um, but then, yeah, entering in chief of staff in and of itself is an interesting role. I don't think on my career pathway, you would have ever heard me say, gee, one day I really want to be a chief of staff.
Mm.
And in fact, the running joke for the first 6 months of my job is that I was actually the chief of stuff because that was the reality of what you're doing is every single day there'd be something new across my table. One
Mhm.
day,
Yeah.
my boss needed to be able to go and meet with various regulators in Canberra, and we needed to be able to have a strategic conversation about the one economic importance of a major bank, how they need to secure it, and how do we work with regulators and foster a really strong relationship. And so my job is to go and craft that agenda, make sure that we've got a really clear strategy and outcomes and objectives towards it, et cetera, et cetera. And then other days it's, the board or the executive have heard about something that is happening globally. How quickly can we update them on what we know about it? What does it mean for the bank? And then what are we doing about it as a security function? There is so much agility to it. And it's probably the part that I didn't expect is there is just an insane amount of fun. And that's not what people think when they think of a cybersecurity function. It's either there's a lot of people in hoodies in a dark basement with no windows, or it's all very serious. And yes, of course, you're ultimately protecting and defending people, information, assets. But there are people in there innovating. There are people learning new skills and trades. There are people really, really excited about the newness. And actually, it's probably one of the domains that just changes so frequently that it just requires people to be really active and engaging and changing ideas. So, we've got things like at that time, partners with a partnership with a university to think about actually what's the new skill set that we actually need to foster in the tertiary sector to kind of shape the security of tomorrow. Innovation partnerships with different providers to say, actually, let's go build something that's going to be country first. What would that actually look like? So an incredibly diverse role, an insane way to throw yourself off a deep end, might I add, but I think one of the most supported roles, but also just the purview is incredible. You learn absolutely everything and you learn it very, very quickly. Would I take a deep dive like that again today? I'm not sure. I think it's like one of those things in your career where you go, I'm going to take that risk. Yeah. And I'm going to do it once. But I will never be able to emphasize enough in my career that risk decision at that time came with a bit of safety because it was someone I knew I could trust and work with. Yep. And so I felt safe enough to go into that ambiguity. And I don't think I've had quite the acceleration in my career like I had during that time. So it was arguably the best choice I ever made, I think.
Amazing. And what did you learn about advising somebody so senior and, not only advising them, but you're kind of their voice across the business? Like, how did you gain that command?
Man, that organizational psychology lecture came in handy because
I bet.
You are 100% talking about people. One, the first thing you kind of recognize very quickly in that kind of a role is your first and utmost priority is to that leader, giving them the psychological safety to take on being sort of an interface into so many people. When you lead security, and this is my experience now, even in my current role working with hundreds of CISOs across the country, is all of them have this heavy burden, which is you're the subject matter expert, you're the driver of a function, you're the driver of that strategy and that capability in an organization. But you're also just the person that thousands of people have questions for. Can I do this? Am I allowed to encrypt this? We're going to make this new big M&A decision. Do you think that's safe enough? I'm hearing about this new technology that might be a little unsafe. Are we allowed to do that? You become this like front door chatbot 24/7, fielding off so many inquiries. So when I was a chief of staff, I actually had to recognize very quickly that I'm also the advisor to hundreds of other stakeholders at any given point in time. You very quickly then have to start rapidly developing a plan with that kind of a senior leader on where are you going to add the most value. And I think this took me a little while to get to this position. I'm not going to say that I had this, down pat in the first 30 days. I think it took me actually fumbling and making mistakes to land on this. But I remember going to my boss at one point because we had this conversation on where do I want to take my role and my function? Like, am I just a single contributor or is this actually a division that we create inside security? And I was really, really driven after 6 months of seeing everything that, and I remember going to him with this pitch where I said, I think I can represent your voice and your voice needs to permeate through multiple layers. And I've still used this strategy to today, which is a chief of staff needs to be able to help a leader permeate their voice through that team that they look after. So do 400, 500, 1,000 people in that division. What do we need to tell them to make sure that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel that they're moving towards? Like, what are we ultimately aiming towards? What's that communication? Then it's the rest of the organization. What do they need from cybersecurity? Because you're still a services provider. You're putting guardrails to give them safety. What are their needs? And how do you communicate that? How do you empower them to also be like security champions for you? And then you've got the above. So all of the executives and above and the board and the CEO, what do they need? What kind of comfort do they need on a regular basis? And then there is everyone outside of that organization, regulators, media, whoever that may be. And so my view was all of those different personas all have different needs, but the voice is the one voice. So how can I be the champion for that voice and be the person that can help them carve that out? And to be honest with you, just at a human level, ease that burden is probably the way I'd put it.
You've made so many pivots, it seems, in your career. You went from banking into cyber, board advisory. Now you're a public advocate for cyber. speaking to the media. What do you think's been the scariest career move that you've ever made?
I mean, the easy answer would be coming into cyber was pretty terrifying because, I mean, for a lot of reasons. One is there are aspects of cybersecurity that is sort of consumable by most people. And I sort of bring this down to like when I'm out there talking about scams or I'm talking about the everyday security, you and I as individuals, we have a phone. We've become pretty adequate in terms of like understanding our own day-to-day personal cyber hygiene and our personal security. So there's an element where it's a topic people can dance with for a little bit. And then it gets to a layer where it actually becomes deeply technical, a bit more complicated. And that's where subject matter expertise is not only there, but needs to be respected. Like I'm really, really fortunate to work in an organization where we've got 1,400 cybersecurity professionals and we've got 10 different divisions and there's deep then expertise within them. So it's hard to ignore the fact that when you walk into cybersecurity, to not just sit there and think that it is that first level that you are kind of familiar with, that behind it actually sits some really, really deep, not just like tools, but actually processes, theories, experimentation, experience that people have deployed for years. I mean, whilst we talk about modern tech, a lot of organizations that we rely on, that we work with, they've got some of the same legacy platforms that they've been operating for decades. Knowing how to secure that and knowing how to secure the tech of the future takes some fundamentally pretty important expertise across this sector. So I think the scariest move was cyber, but it was scary because the more I learned about it, the more I started to realize there is deep expertise here. And therefore, I've established a deep respect for it. And so I always want to be as clear as I possibly can on what parts of it I'm really good at. And then the parts where actually it's always, there is going to be someone out there that knows this particular component better than I do. And I hope that I do that well, because like the part that I think I've always carried since the day I was a graduate, hopefully I can take technical expertise, consume it in a way that I can then make it understandable for everybody else. I want to be the middle ground person that can be the translator amongst both parties. I think that still holds true. I actually think that is still what I do every single day.
What do you do when you feel really out of your depth in technical conversation? I'm sure you've been in that situation many times.
Even when I mentor people, I find this a really interesting topic. And actually what I find surprising is when I tell people that me and imposter syndrome are best friends. We see each other very frequently. And they're like, how? Like maybe seemingly I've created a bit of a reputation that I know what I'm talking about. And, I am proud of where I've grown, but at the same time, there's so much I don't know. And people talk at length about, there's always going to be someone that knows more than you and that's fine and whatnot. And I agree with that and I believe in it. And I want to keep growing and getting better at what I do. I think the day I start to feel really confident and like I've got this, and maybe even there's semblances of like boredom is dangerous territory that I don't want to be in. So it sounds a bit contradictory that like maybe the feeling of somewhat of having a bit of anxiety about not knowing is not the greatest place to be at. But I can't deny the fact that my best performance has come out of actually those zones. It does then require me to focus a lot on my mental health. And boy, have I got on a journey of getting that wrong, being burnt out, making my mistakes, being too absorbed in self-doubt, and then having a really, really good circle of people around me that know when to pull me out of that as well. Until the point at which I've had to learn my own guardrails of then when are things going bad? When can I start to hear the negative voices getting a little too loud in my head and needing to snap out of it? I'm not going to pretend like I have a perfect answer of it, but I think my bounce back is a little better. Like I think I can go into the negative and I can bounce out of that back into somewhat stable a little bit easier than I used to before. But it's all come with making mistakes first.
Yeah, you recognize those signs and you know what to do to pull yourself out. You came back from maternity leave and you got promoted shortly after. Can you take us back to that moment? Like what was going on in your head at that moment?
Great question. I think about this often as my son is now 9 and I was 25. I had my son.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I get that reaction sometimes. And it is interesting, right? Like changing dynamics of the working woman and the choices of like, when do you take that plunge? Because it really doesn't matter which part of your career you're at. It is a nerve-wracking decision to make because there comes an acceptance of, I think you kind of know that you'll have an absence from work for a certain period of time. But you also step into ambiguity where you're like, actually, I don't know if that'll actually be longer than maybe or shorter than what I'm expecting. All of this is an unknown until I'm on the other side of it and I meet my little one kind of thing, right? Not too different for me. I never walked into, at this point in my career is the ideal time. I just had an instinct about when I felt like was the right time just for my life. and for my situation. But I won't lie, there were definitely voices in my head that thought, do I now just have to suck up, a year's slowdown on my progression?
Mm-hmm.
So went on to maternity leave, just accepting my fate. And then one of the things I will say is I have been incredibly lucky and supported because I had, in my situation, after I'd had my son, I had both my mum and my mother-in-law play such a vitally important role in helping babysit my son. That only gave me the psychological safety to actually think about coming back to work. And I came back after 6 months, even though I had the choice of doing a year. It was actually, funnily enough, back to our previous conversation, was on mental health. I very much struggled during my maternity leave. I needed some kind of mental stimulation and I wasn't getting it. And then I kind of diminished and deteriorated as a person. And I just, everything became a bit of a struggle. That infrastructure kicked in. The people who were around me and love and support me had kicked in. And I was very, very fortunate. And yeah, we made the decision, maybe I'll come back to work only part-time, maybe 2 to 3 days a week, because my brain needed that stimulation for myself to sort of balance out. So you can imagine at that point, me coming back to work, my expectations of career progression and trajectory were low to nothing. I just thought, I'm just going to work. I just want the stimulation of being around adults. And it just so happened that somebody had heard about the work I'd done previously. She was kicking off something new. She pulled me aside. And first and foremost, maybe being a mum herself, it didn't bother her at all that I was sort of on this part-time arrangement, that I was kind of finding my feet, that I was making my way back in. I think she could connect with my story. I think she sort of tried to gauge my ambition, and my ambition was exactly the same as when I'd left. Like, I still wanted to be someone that was going to go somewhere and keep moving forward and keep getting challenged. And I think I remember just saying, I just want the next problem to sink my teeth into, and then I'll move to the next thing. I'm not the kind of person that can just sit and run. I'm a come in and change and transform and then leave. That has always been true for my career. Something about that, I think, appealed and was like, not only are we going to give you that new problem, but we're going to elevate your position and actually get you in a driving seat. And that just, you can imagine, I went from being at maybe some really lows to actually being exuberantly high. And all of a sudden, all of those things that I was psychologically challenged with at home started to diminish as well. I became so motivated, excited, and like myself again that I became innately a much happier mum. I started to deeply look forward to actually that bonding time with my son as a baby that I was really struggling with that first 6 months. So massive turnaround to have someone that, one, could empathize meant so much to me. And it's taught me a lot about now my responsibility back into our industry and to help other women. But the other, to take a risk. That was a huge risk for a senior leader to take on me, to say, actually, we'll not just have you come in and sink your teeth on a pretty big strategic program, but you're going to do it as a project manager and we're going to elevate you. It was
incredible.
I only hope that I can pass that on to other people in my career as well.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, so many things resonate, and especially wanting that balance from your life of family life, but career as well. And that's where you feel your best and knowing yourself. Yeah, that's fabulous. So thank you for sharing. Let's talk a little bit more about cyber. So we want to demystify it for our listeners. You mentioned before that stereotype of like the hoodie, in the basement, but what does the job actually look like day to day?
Yeah, I'm laughing only because my colleagues who do like wearing hoodies and prefer a basement are probably thinking, hey, and we do, and we're here, recognize us too. Well, I think maybe that is actually the perfect analogy for the fact that it is incredibly diverse. And maybe if I hadn't fully embraced it as a career pathway, I probably wouldn't have actually had that appreciation that there is no stereotypical, this is what a cyber team looks like. And there will be all sorts. There will also be, probably more than I've seen in other tech areas, I could probably boldly say, is people from very different disciplines. And I think maybe the common thread of where we're able to inherit people. So, for example, we do a lot of training and education, because ultimately empowering people on cybersecurity requires taking them on a journey, getting them to understand it and deeply be able to interact with it. So we have, just like a lot of other education practices, a deep sort of ability to go in and train people at various different levels in various different roles. And innately to that, you can actually think of how many people who do teaching and education and training as a discipline in a career, even if it is a different subject matter. Bringing someone like that and then giving them the cyber lens, how they're able to then turn that into something really meaningful. It's basically the combination of those skill sets that's just phenomenal. Likewise, people who've had a legal background that come in and help us design the right policies and standards and frameworks and think about cyber risk implications will do a phenomenal job because they use that deep legal background. And so you start to get a bit of a picture of people from all different backgrounds. There's just that transferability. Sort of taking on a similar journey to me and so many other people, which is accepting that there might be some things you don't know, but that you can actually learn about it. You can embrace it as a subject matter, and then you combine those skill sets together to see how you can offer it. What we, at least in CyberCX and a lot of other organizations, try and do is try and demystify cybersecurity so that we don't have particularly people at the tertiary sector not getting put off or intimidated by what taking up a career pathway in cyber would look like, not feeling like if I haven't followed a certain linear path, therefore can I get a job inside cybersecurity, wanting to make sure that those doors, as many of them we can possibly open, are as open wide as possible for people from all different types of career pathways so that we can actually foster it. And I think if you talk to most people in cybersecurity, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, they'd all echo a very similar sentiment, which is we're lacking skill sets in Australia. We actually need more local cyber talent. So the more open we can be about what the capability is, how we can actually progress your career and all the different pathways you can get out of it is better for the greater good for all industry, actually, when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, amazing. And do you think people still need to do a degree to get in, or are there other ways to kind of break into the field?
The easiest way to answer this is no. You don't absolutely need it. However, if you have the option, if you are at that point in your career where a university degree is something that you desire and you have the ability to go and do it at a university and they've got a bachelor or a master's of cybersecurity, I would say why not? As much as getting practical experience is going to be incredibly valuable, you get such an advantage learning the foundations of what you're going to end up actually putting into practice. I feel like it's like any other discipline. Let's go and actually set the framework and the infrastructure of all the concepts and the principles of what technology looks like today, what landscape you're going to be operating around, what have the threat actors been doing? And I think that's a really, really important part is what have the bad guys already been doing that has actually caused disruption and devastation in terms of large organizations being compromised, people's personal information is being stolen. What does the bad look like out there? Become really well acquainted with that, understand the methods, the tactics that threat actors actually use and cyber criminals use, and then being able to understand the defensive side of things. And then imagine how much of a massive sort of benefit that is when you then come into a role and you've got sort of those foundational knowledge boxes ticked. You kind of really understand the concepts, and then you can actually see it being put into practice, I think is a huge advantage. So if you haven't done a bachelor's in cybersecurity, then again, I think it's coming back to what kind of the skill sets or attributes do you already have that actually would be quite transferable. And I think, as always, like take a risk, take the plunge, find those entry-level cyber opportunities and go for them. Because actually the people that are hiring can sometimes even draw that connection for you, even if it isn't easy for you to find them out. We have like a pretty robust academy program in which we actually do a combination of education and on-the-job training as well.
Great.
And yeah, we have people that come in that are straight out of university. We've got some people that skip university as well. We've had some people that have had an entire career change. And for them, sometimes the challenge is, well, I don't know where to start. I actually don't know what that role would look like. So how do I even know what to apply for? And we set a really good baseline of doing a bit of a matching, like a sort of like, tell me about yourself and what are you really good at? Sort of look at all the different types of roles and capabilities we have. And then we try and do a bit of a pairing exercise. And then
amazing.
You get to try it out. And actually a lot of cybersecurity teams across the country run a sort of similar hiring program. So I always encourage people to have a go and try it. You never know what it is about your unique profile that actually combined with a bit of cyber knowledge could be really, really valuable.
And I think there's a lot of like free TAFE courses out there as well on cyber if you're wanting to just maybe take the first step. So take us to the moment. What does it actually feel like when you're in the room when there's a major cyber attack unfolding?
Sadly, I've had the privilege of being in that situation one too many times, and it can manifest in a couple of different ways. So remembering if you're talking about an organization that is running cybersecurity monitoring, and often in major enterprises, critical infrastructure, they all have a baseline of some level of detection that is running across their networks, their laptops and devices, their systems. The start of a cyber attack can come up in a couple of different ways, but if you're running that detection, for example, you can get an alert that says, hey, we've picked up on something anomalous. There is something suspicious here. It might be a login that doesn't seem familiar. It might be a new device that's not really part of our estate. It could be a number of different things, but that sort of 24/7 detection can usually ping an alert. And that alert is usually sometimes the very, very early stages of, hey, something's not right. But likewise, a lot of cyber attacks sometimes don't start there either. Sometimes it's an employee's received a suspicious looking email. They've clicked on a link. They've then gone and accidentally downloaded some software or done an activity that has maybe given up more of their credentials, and a threat actor has used that to actually have a gateway in. Increasingly, we talk about social engineering, which is essentially again, this is a bit of a theme for us today, but it is deeply psychological. It is the manipulation of a legitimate employee, sometimes through a really prolonged targeted campaign to try and get them to give up personal information. The threat actors are sort of enlisting you unconsciously
Mm.
into handing over the keys to the kingdom. So if you imagine that I've actually taken a legitimate employee's credentials in and I make my way in, that may not be detected as quickly or as easily. But
Mhm.
as soon as which any of these activities, any of these entry points becomes recognized as, hey, we might have something happening here, that very, very early stages, let's say the first couple of hours of a cyber attack, are nothing but ambiguity. You never have all of the facts on the table perfectly laid out for you to then make a decision. In fact, a lot of the times it starts with what's happened? How have they gotten in? Where have they
Mm.
moved? Do we actually have an understanding across our estate? Have they moved across? Have they actually been quietly hiding in our systems for months and we didn't know and they've only just made themselves aware?
Mm.
And sometimes in really severe circumstances, it's they've sent an email to someone. Sometimes it can be an executive or a board director, and they might actually be announcing that they've already either stolen your data, they've already actually locked you out of your systems, and they might be holding you to ransom. Kind of
Wow.
avenues for a lot of these are just really, really varied. In some instances where I've been involved, actually, some organizations have learned about a cyber attack through their customers, which is often
Mm.
some of the worst instances. So sometimes in banking institutions, it can be hosts of customers that all have suddenly been compromised in one
Yeah.
hit. So it could be like large amounts of withdrawals just happening at like a sort of an unprecedented sort of suspicious scale. You know that there's been
Yeah.
like a targeted cyber attack. This is like a real like large scale sort of syndicate attempt. Those are sometimes instances where organizations have learned that they've actually been a victim of a cyber attack as well through their customers themselves. So the first couple of hours is aggressively just trying to uncover the facts, because time is the most critical component to any kind of a
Mm.
cyber attack. If you think about someone breaking in, the faster you're able to actually understand how far that spread is, you might actually be able to have a very quick strategy to stop the bleeding and be able to
Mhm.
eradicate. Like that's your primary focus in any cyber attack is how do I stop the bleeding? How do I stop the spread? And how do I actually eradicate the threat actor as quickly as possible? If we're talking about hospitals or critical sort of organizations where legitimately people's lives are on the line, then you got to think about the damage that could cause if someone locked you out of your critical systems. If there are people reliant on really, really significant technology that needs to be on, what
Mm.
happens if a threat actor actually just strips you of that access and you have no idea when you can get that back? So a lot of it is forensic work. A lot of it is like technical discovery of how bad is the blast radius of what's happened? How
Mhm.
quickly can we then put a stop to it? Organizations generally have a couple of choices that they make. In those early stages when we're advising them, sometimes the unfortunate circumstances, you might actually have to turn off your own systems yourself. And now it's a very stressful and a horrifying
Mm.
situation to be in. I've been inside boards where I've had to walk up and say to them, I actually am at a point based on the data that's been provided that we have no choice. We're going to have to turn off your entire network. Your employees are not going to
Wow.
have access. Nobody's going to have access. Your third parties are not going to have access. And, it is a jaw-dropping thing to have to drop to a group of people who are just still trying to grip up what's happened.
Mm.
And often you have to be backed by a certain logic. And a lot of the
Yeah.
times our logic comes from, here is where we've seen this happen before. And maybe sometimes it's here's where those organizations were not able to grip this up quickly. So let's actually make sure you're empowered to try and actually manage this as quickly as possible. So early stages of a cyber attack, insane amounts of ambiguity, a real challenge to be able to get all the facts on the table, but coupled with often, which seems like it's diametrically opposed, but a need to make rapid decisions. And so
Mm.
actually, this is fundamentally why we talk to organizations time and time again to crisis exercise and to simulate. You have to practice this in slow time. You have to put yourself through this kind of a hypothetical scenario to stress test how your procedures actually work. When we work with organizations, let's say, and we say, what would you do if there was a major weather storm event? They usually have some really good plans around actually we would shut down certain offices, we'd send people home, we'd issue out these communications, etc. In a very similar vein, we need organizations to have the exact same type of thinking and a plan when it comes to cybersecurity, because we could be in a
Yeah.
situation where, let's say you've got hundreds of employees all distributed working across the country in different places, also working at home. How do you notify them? How do you talk to them? How do you tell
Mm.
them
Yeah.
that, hey, we're going to have to switch everything off, or actually some things are going to be unavailable, or actually we potentially have a cyber incident. We can't talk about it too much just yet because we're still investigating. Having some kind of planning that you've tried to exercise and plan for in slow time becomes vitally important so that you're actually able to have a stronger muscle memory to deal with that ambiguity.
Yeah, wow, that is fascinating. And I bet for yourself too in your career, you've become a whole lot more decisive and able to, make decisions faster too as a result of that experience.
I am. I think there is something about having seen these situations But I'd say the primary thing I've probably changed a lot when it has come to this is realizing that at the end of the day, I am engaging with a group of people, and I've probably caught them on like a Wednesday mid-morning, or actually often sometimes cyber incidents are a Sunday, very early hours of a Sunday morning. So you're catching people off guard. You're likely the bearer of bad news, but you're also probably the symbol of hope. And that's a really big responsibility to take, is with every set of bad news, we have an innate responsibility, all of us that work in cybersecurity, not just those that are providers, but those who are kind of doing the grind every single day inside organizations. You have this incredible responsibility to be able to gift people with a plan or something of a plan or a plan to a plan, or at least we can do these next couple of steps. And that is, I think, the ultimate test of being really good in terms of understanding where the threat landscape keeps changing, understanding how quickly the threat actors are evolving, understanding the techniques that we have available to help defend makes you the most vitally important person in that room.
Yeah, wow, fascinating. So this is Tech Careers Hotline, and we've got a question from one of our listeners in school.
My question for Shameela is, has AI changed how you do your job day to day?
We just hosted an event today, and my running joke for the whole event was that I was going to collect $1 every time we said the word AI, because it is...
So how rich are you now?
Listen, we're close to getting a year, I'm going to say. I can't go anywhere and have any conversation about cybersecurity where AI isn't hand in glove. So I'll talk a little bit about like the tricky problem and the tricky advantage that AI is spoken about. But I'd say the quick answer to that question is hugely transformative. There's an element here where you say the cybers are still the cybers. Like the way that we protect and defend is still fundamentally the way that we protect and defend. I don't think AI has come in and wiped the floor of everything we've ever done in cybersecurity before, to the point where people are sitting there going, oh my God, I need to like fundamentally retrain, because the fundamentals still remain the fundamentals. In all of those strategies that we have on knowing how to protect and defend, have we had to slightly evolve our methodology, maybe thinking about speed and velocity? Yes, 100%. For cyber defenders, we've already been using AI as a superpower. Why wouldn't we? A primary driver for us using AI to help defend better, faster, smarter, to empower our people to actually be able to do more at a larger scale so that they're not sitting there having to do things manually, is because the bad guys are doing it. Bad guys have been using AI and exploiting it for actually some time. They've been able to produce like phishing campaigns at just a faster scale. They're able to make things far more hyper-realistic. The way that you can use AI to perform reconnaissance on your targets is just far more superpowered. Like think about our day-to-day as to how we use AI, whether you choose to use ChatGPT, Gemini, whichever tool that you really love using. Think about how much of ease it's given you in your day-to-day life. You know, that home renovation project now is not you manually trying to craft that out. It's beautifully mapped out for you based on you feeding it a little bit of information. Think about how transformative that is for someone whose primary purpose is to do harm, or for financial gain, or to cause disruption. It's enormously valuable. No longer are they sitting there having to manually churn through so much data sets. They can do that at the click of fingers. They can launch attacks at the click of fingers. And now as we talk about agentic, it's essentially saying, let's take the steps 1 to 10 that a human was going to do and actually have an agent be able to go and do that with a level of autonomy. So long as we codify it with the right actions and guardrails, it can go and just do that on our behalf. So imagine just deploying dozens or hundreds of agents to go out and do an activity that a human used to be able to do. Imagine that scales. It's vast, actually. And so from a defensive point of view, we use it. We use it to get better at being able to find threat actors where they might be trying to enter, move, cause disruption. We use it to actually deploy the same tactics that threat actors do. We actually do them ourselves. So we've got what we call ethical hackers. They go into organizations and they simulate what a bad guy could do, so that when we find those vulnerabilities or those areas where, you know, those gaps in your security might be, you actually have the ability to quickly fix that yourself before actually it gets exploited by someone external. So all of these personnel that we're talking about, they're all vastly empowered by leveraging AI. I mean, even consultants that are doing like risks and strategies, you have the ability to now do research at just a much faster scale and in a far more efficient manner. So I think it's definitely being leveraged, and I think it's fundamentally actually supported a lot of people that work in cybersecurity. But I think cybersecurity people are going to be the people that actually understand its limitations really, really well. I think cybersecurity people are also just acutely aware of that vital importance of human overlay. We've heard instances of where people have like deployed AI and let it run free and then have gone, oh my God, it's gone and done something I didn't want it to do. It's hallucinated or it's performed something that wasn't right. If anything, it's reinstilled deeply how much humans become even more vitally important. It is not a human replacement tool. It's a human complement. It's an empowerment capability, but it should never replace the judgment that you rely on humans to be able to put in place. And humans are pretty exceptional at building, designing, developing, and thinking outside of the box. Imagine just being able to support them to not have to do so much of the manual and repetitive, actually. So there's a couple of different ways that it's being used. I think it's all really exciting and motivating, and just it's our next horizon. So the more we get to use it, the more these models get smarter and faster, the more benefits we'll absolutely see out of it. But we've also in cybersecurity just always got to have an eye to how the bad guys get to weaponize it also.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and great question. Let's finish up with some questions around career advice. So we spoke before about how you've had roles where you are advising a lot of senior people. How do you get taken seriously in rooms that weren't built with you in mind?
Great question. So I'll probably start with, I am often in a lot of rooms where, let's say, the dynamic of the people sitting in front of me are not people that are like me. And that might not just be gender, that could be age, that could be walks of life, that could be experiences. I started at a place where I was very intimidated walking into those rooms. I felt like, why would they take me seriously? What do I have to offer? Those negative voices that, it happens to all of us. And there will still be instances where that still happens. That is just a factor of life. And I think I've just become better at recognizing that nervousness that I feel minutes before walking into a room is probably a healthy feeling. I don't think I want to sort of waltz into those rooms with thinking like I'm the expert and I know the answer to everything. But when I do walk into that room, I have recognized time and time again that I have seen cyber attacks and how they've developed and how they've manifested across organizations. I am seeing live right now how we are using and deploying AI. So I do have an opinion on it and I can advise organizations on it. And we get live stories and insights based on how threat actors are weaponizing it. So those vectors and multiple others make me a qualified person to walk into that room and give advice and be able to give my opinion. And I think that's what I always fundamentally come back to is you have a job to go out and serve. And it is those people that I'm serving. As long as I kind of hold true to those principles, it gives me enough that I feel confident walking into that room to be heard, to be able to voice what I think really matters, and then ultimately to then be able to be open to seek feedback. I never want to walk into a room, sort of project my opinion and then just waltz out of there either. I think be able to be open and you have to welcome challenge as well to your own thinking. That's the only way that you can keep progressing and evolving, I think.
Great reframe.
Hi, Shameela. I was wondering, what's the worst career advice you've ever received, and did you follow it?
Yeah. I can't believe, by the way, how quickly I have an answer for this. But I actually had a mentor that was really kind and got me this external career coaching, like the types of people that come in and they do like a full analysis of your strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. And no disrespect to the person's methodology, and I think it works really well. But I think it's fair to say that they often are coaching people, at a certain level, they get to a certain age group. And I don't think they've worked with a lot of young people. And I think the reason why their advice bothered me at the time, and it's probably one that resonates with me, is I remember them telling me that they think the biggest risk with my personality is that I don't stop and smell the roses enough. And I'm too focused on constantly looking forward, and that I need to just slow down and enjoy where I am. Someone listening to this is probably thinking, that's not bad advice. Like, what's wrong with telling someone that they should just enjoy the journey, not just like where to go next and all of that. But I just find that laying that kind of advice down on a person that you can see in front of you is driven, hungry, ambitious, and is someone who's just always looking forward. It's like telling them to just stop being them and actually embrace being the complete opposite. And I still fundamentally don't resonate with that advice. Even I think it's been like maybe almost a decade later, because one, it's never going to be innately who I am. Sometimes you're just the makeup of who you are. And ever since I was young, I just always felt like I always wanted to focus on the next thing. It's probably why I change and evolve so often. So telling me to just stop kind of feels like I'm being suffocated, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
When I now seek people's advice that I really look up to, they have something that I aspire to want to be like. It may not be them entirely, but it's like aspects of their personality or their career or choices that they've made that I really want to be like. One of the things that I respect the most is that when they deliver that advice, they actually contextualize it to me. They take the time to know me, what makes me tick, what makes me good, but also where I'm not as strong, where my weaknesses are, things that can sort of crumble me a little bit. They know how to bring that advice and level it to me. So I try and do that now when I'm giving people advice is you kind of don't just want to sit there and go, hey, go be the opposite of who you innately are. But actually, let me kind of coach you and guide you to maybe take the things that you're really good at but find a way to become more confident with it, more comfortable with it, using those strengths towards something. Yeah, that, if someone still tells me to stop and smell the roses, I'm going to be swiftly ignoring.
And it sounds like right at the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about knowing your own guardrails and knowing how to re-energize yourself. So you've taken the essence of that advice, but in a way that feels real to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So imagine we are 10, 20 years in the future. What do you think future Shameela will be doing then?
Hopefully robots have taken over and I'm not doing anything. I'm kidding. Ooh, I mean, isn't it wild to even think about the next 10 years? Who could have predicted what 2026 was going to look like? 5 years ago, did we all know the way AI was going to take over organizations at the speed and the scale that it was? So I think if we're going to learn from the events that are happening around us, I think we should stop telling people to have such long projected roadmaps for their lives and actually instead come back to how quickly can we adapt? When we talk to people right now about careers, let's say we pick on people who are worried. Is my job still going to be around? What do I do? The only thing we can support them around is how quickly can we adapt? Like, what are things that we can actually start doing that might help us actually understand the value that we provide in the future, understand how we're going to work with this new evolved technology. And even as the technology we're talking about today, recognizing it could be vastly different in 6 months. Like trying to predict that, to me, my personal opinion might be a little bit futile. What you can focus on is how adaptable can I be? Am I willing to be humble and say that I might be an executive of 10, 20 years, but I'm going to go train. I'm going to actually go learn something completely new. That's probably the thing that I want to be doing. So in 10 years' time, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, that I'm looking at a world that's going to look very, very different to where we are. But I'm excited. I'm excited to go and sink my teeth into whatever that new thing is. I'm lucky enough to be a mum of a 9-year-old who keeps me on my toes with new tech anyways. I've got, a small child that's so hungry and deeply invested in technology. So in 10 years' time, when he's 19, like who knows what that kind of world's going to look like for him. So I'm kind of excited to see it from my journey as a career professional, as a technologist, but also through the lens of my little one and seeing like what the world's going to open up for him by the time he's 19. So I hope that answers your question, but I hope I've also cutely maybe avoided answering it as well.
Well, Shameela, thank you so, so much for this conversation. You've made me feel so excited about cyber and you've painted a really interesting and insightful world. So really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really, really enjoyed the chat and hopefully something I've said in there has been valuable for your listeners. And I hope that for anyone who's been thinking about a cyber career, that they take the plunge and try out.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Shameela. Take care.
Thanks, Adair. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Tech Careers Hotline today. And if you did, please help us out by subscribing, leaving us a review, or even share it with someone who you think might find value from it today. Until next time.